Welcome. This is Dog Central on a Wednesday night. I am Graham Coffee, and look who that is. That's John
Hey,
Smith.
what's happening, everybody?
News of your demise has been greatly exaggerated.
It has been. It has been. I'm alive and well, ready to talk some ball. It's been a while since I've joined you, Graham. I'm glad to be back.
I'm glad to have you back, man.
Yeah,
How's your summer been going?
it's been good. Lots of busyness with family um, things, but it's been great.
Nice. And before we get into our big slew of questions from the chat and subscribers, was there anything that particularly stood out to you from SEC Media Days last week?
Man, so many things stood out to me from SEC Media Days. I I think what's interesting, Nick Saban. So I think some other folks have talked about this, but um, Nick Saban seemed more relaxed than I've probably seen him in forever, which is always interesting. You know, talking about his vacation to Italy, talking about which was pretty funny, by the way, saying, yeah, it's a great time. There's lots of good stuff to see. It's like Saban, it's Italy, bro.
Yeah,
But it's
Florence
you can tell
sucks.
exactly you can tell the man doesn't vacation very much. The way he's talking about a 50th anniversary trip to Italy, like, oh yeah, there was so many things to see. I recommend anybody if you get the chance to go. It's like, yeah, you should. But no, I think seeing him relaxed, I think seeing, Hugh Freeze back was really interesting. But overall, I think there was no surprises. I mean, I think it's media days. I think everybody came with their kind of agenda and their pitch, and now it's time to get on the ball. So
Yeah, Hugh Freeze was back and only got asked questions about football,
yeah,
like that was
yeah,
I mean, I don't know. Whatever your opinion of Hugh Freeze is, it was kind of like just for me very very kind of drove the point home of like, yeah,
mm,
we're about to get back to football. So,
absolutely,
I'm excited. One thing that Georgia fans are excited about and should be excited about, Justin Williams, number one linebacker in the class of 2024, just committed to the Dogs. Um, really big get for Georgia and Kirby Smart. Like, I feel like Georgia gets a 5-star linebacker every year now. It's been 4 straight years that they've done that. And there's only been 9 5-star linebackers in that time period. But this one felt maybe a little more significant than others just because you're talking about a kid out of Texas and you're probably about to lose to Marcus Riddick out of your class. What
hmm
were your impressions of the Justin Williams news?
Well, I mean, my impressions are really two things. Glenn Schumann is absolutely the best recruiter in the country at his position, and up there. You know, when you look at the haul that he's pulled in over the last couple of years, he's up there with Todd Hartley and Brian Hartline and all the guys who are absolutely just pulling in beasts. I think Justin Williams. I was a little surprised, to be honest. Not surprised that he would want to come play at Georgia, but that linebacker room is absolutely insane right now. It is absolutely stacked. And to not only have a room that is stacked with, 3 of the top 10 linebackers in the country joined this last year's class, but to have the number one linebacker say, yeah, I want to come in, I want to compete, I want to join that room that's stacked. And you got 2 guys that, Small Munden and Jamon Dumas Johnson, who are probably going to lead the way for this year, right? So you've got all of these guys who are stacking up in that room, and but not surprised that anybody at that caliber will want to come play for Glenn Schumann. I mean, he's the best, absolutely the best at his position in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. It's him and Hartline,
Mm-hmm.
like you said,
Yeah.
and I think for Georgia with Williams, I think
Mm-hmm.
what's exciting about him is that his game is kind of like this. He's got the length and the athleticism of
Mm-hmm.
a Mondin, but
Mm-hmm.
he arrives with the pad level and the speed of like a Tyndall or, I hesitate to ever bring up Roquan Smith's name, but there are some things he does on tape that are reminiscent of Roquan. So, yeah, I mean, even in all of this linebacker talent that Georgia's brought in, he is the highest rated linebacker recruit in the history of the program. We'll see if that holds through the rest of the rankings, and all that stuff seems to change weekly now. But a really, really talented player, like, even if you take positional value out of it, he might be the most talented player in Georgia's 2024 class right now. Like, guy is a absolute freak show of a linebacker.
Yeah. I mean, there's not much you can say when you're. I don't think people realize there's not what you have to have naturally from athleticism, your instincts, the way that you show up and play to be a 5-star linebacker, right? I mean, that not only to be a 5-star, but be the number 1 linebacker in the country. That is a position that it's interesting because a lot of positions, the way that the recruiting ranking sites do these positions, you can kind of say, well, that guy, is a 5-star because of his measurables or whatever. But linebackers, like you actually, it is hard to get into that echelon of 5-star linebackers. Not many people make it into there even from these recruiting ranking services. So to be that high truly speaks to the caliber of Justin Williams, but also, you mentioned it. I mean, the highest linebacker. The highest ranked linebacker recruit in Georgia history. I mean, it's just wild when you start thinking about who's in that group. So, yeah,
it is. It's definitely crazy to look at it and think about it. Another thing that's a little bit crazy is news breaking today that Colorado has reached out to the Big 12 about maybe coming back home. This would be like the first, I think, time in realignment history that we've seen somebody leave and then come back, which I think is beautiful, man. If you love something, let it go. See if it returns to you. The Big 12 did. Colorado loves the Big 12, apparently. I'm all for this move. I'm 100% pumped for this. Like, I want to see it. I want to see Colorado playing teams that border Colorado more often. I know that Colorado is out west with the rest of the Pac-12, but it's really not. Most of that conference is literally on the Pacific Seaboard. And then I just think it'd be interesting to see them with access to Texas recruiting as Deion Sanders is in there. Like, I think Colorado is one of those teams that they sort of popped up out of nowhere in the early 90s. So no one really hates them, save for maybe a few people in the state of Nebraska.
Yeah.
And even them, I think, like, try to be like, no, that's not our real rival. So I think it's more fun when they're good. And, whether it's with Deion at the helm or not, I think that going to the Big 12 is probably the healthiest move for their football program at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you also look at Brett Yormark.
Whoa. Sorry, Josh saying Brett Murphy reporting Colorado official.
Is it official? Wow. Is it official?
Breaking news.
Breaking news. Well, I mean, Brett Yormark, the dude, so what he's putting together in the Big 12 conference is a collection of teams that are built on very marketable brands and very marketable regions and very marketable personalities. And the guy, it's not surprised, he was Rock Nation's CEO and president of business operations. He comes from an entertainment and sports background. And and I think when you ran Jay-Z's entertainment company and also had, sports experience in your background, it's just an interesting mix of what he's doing with the Big 12. Yeah. With the Big 12. And so I think the Big 12, I mean, the Big 12 is putting the Pac-12 there's stuff in the Pac-12 in a locker right now. It is like, I mean, it's wild I thought the worst thing that could happen to the Pac-12, and it's probably is still the worst thing, is for USC and UCLA to go to the Big Ten. But then you throw in that you're turning around and losing Deion Sanders, which is one of the few marketable things you have, truly marketable things you have right now in the Pac-12 when you look at like a nationwide cachet that people would be interested in. And I know they're probably not losing them, they're not losing them like right now. But
dude didn't even come to his first media days.
Yeah. But it's wild, wild to see. That happened pretty quick.
I mean, like, yeah, in like an hour and a half, apparently. So, well, so that's interesting. What does this mean for the Pac-12 is kind of my question. I think if you look at, our guy Harry says, stick a fork in the Pac-12. You might be right, Harry. But at the same time, there's still like all that Phil Knight money up there in the Pacific Northwest. Washington is a good program, just had a 10-win season, beat Texas in a bowl game. Where do those teams go is kind of the question. And I think the really interesting implications, for the purpose maybe of this show, like I think you and I both are very big fans of all college football. We watch college football from across the country, but if you're a Georgia fan, like, why does this matter? Why do you care about it? I think the answer to that is probably that this could very quickly turn into like an arms race of sorts, right? Where the remnants of the old Pac-12, like if the Big Ten starts scooping up a couple of those schools, then does the SEC feel the need to act, and we go down this like Cold War path of mutually assured destruction where we have the Super League thing pan out? Or does the Big 12 become because I mean that would put the Big 12 at 15 teams now with Colorado? That's probably not going to work, right?
No, the Big 12 is not done. They can't be done. For me, I don't know what the Pac-12. So if you look at what's been happening with the Pac-12, so they've been fiddling around with a TV deal. You have schools who don't really know what kind of money they're actually going to be making for media rights. You have now 3 schools that have bailed for other conferences. But to your point, I mean, the Pac-12, if they want to try to keep it alive, then they do have still have a decent foundation. But who are you going to bring in? I mean, it's like who are you going to bring into that group that's going to provide significant value, especially now that you're in this kind of weird spot of still trying to negotiate a media rights deal. And so I think the next, the only thing that I think the Pac-12 can do at this point is try to recruit as many folks as they can to see. But I think both the Big 12 and the Pac-12 are, to Josh's point, I mean, I think both of those conferences are kind of a mess. It's like now the Big 12 is, you're losing Texas and Oklahoma. You're replacing that with Houston and UCF and like Colorado, and it's becoming, all of these conferences are a mess at this point. So what's going to happen? We know what's going to happen. I mean, the SEC and the Big Ten are going to keep expanding. We're ended up in a situation where we have 2 conferences that have 20 teams each, and they're going to form their own leagues. Basically, is what's going to end up happening over the next 5 or 6 years. In my opinion, because I think there's no disincentive at this point to not continue expanding. At this point, it's like you can only continue to create value when you are already, kind of building. You've already broke out of any regional semblance of conferences. You're already breaking out of any kind of historical semblance of conferences, and so at that point, it feels like all bets are off.
It is, and I think what's really interesting about this whole situation happening right now at this time is that we're also about to go into this new 12-team playoff era, and that is going to have this, the first 2 years of that are the only 2 years that like it's assured that we will have the rules around the format that we have, like with the automatic bids for conference champion, and the G5 entry for the top ranked G5 team and all of that. So like in 2 years, the Pac-12 is probably going to be losing their opportunity to have an automatic bid into the playoff. Maybe we'll see, right? Like that's definitely on the table. And then you have a situation where, like, if the SEC or the Big 10 or the Big 12 doesn't like some of these rules, like now you're moving into an era with less conferences, and it's just like when power consolidates, usually different things happen. And so I'm very interested to see, what becomes of some of the caveats that are attached to this 12-team format. Like, or is someone going to threaten to break away, or is the SEC and the Big 10 going to look at everybody and be like, if you guys don't do this the way we want to do it, then we'll just go and do this ourselves, right?
I mean, I think they're kind of. I mean, Greg Sankey is kind of doing some of that anyway. Like, I think they're. I mean, he hasn't done anything major in terms of but the whole Texas and Oklahoma deal was under the table, behind the scenes. No one had any inkling that it was going on. And I think what's happening is you see two conferences that have built enough cachet, and more importantly enough actual cash to kind of dictate what's going to happen. And so I don't see any way with a 12-team playoff. I don't see any disincentive for the Big 10 and the SEC to continue expanding. There's no disincentive for them to just continue adding teams. Just keep adding teams, keep stockpiling, because at the end of the day, you're getting to a point where you can start dictating kind of your terms when it comes to postseason, when it comes to bowls, when it comes to all of these things. I just don't see any disincentive for them to keep adding.
Yeah, I think you summed it up pretty well. And I think the interesting part about this is just, I think this is kind of sad in a way, man. Like the college football that we grew up with and that, like I loved, this is kind of this season really is sort of the last like season of college football in the format that I've known it to be in my entire life, without a 12-team playoff and with 5 Power 5 conferences and just sort of the traditional colors drawn in the traditional lines. But change is always inevitable with anything, especially with the amount of money that's getting thrown into this sport. And let's be honest, this sport is owned by corporate media entities at this point, right? Like ESPN and Fox and to a lesser extent CBS, NBC. Like everyone has a large stake in this, and the college football playoff is a television show. It is not it's not anything else, really. Like, yes, we happen to have some football around it, but they just want more games to sell to TV. If you are interested in supporting college football media that is not owned by a large corporate entity, check us out at dogcentral.com. You can find all of the latest UGA intel and analysis, thoughts and musings from myself. John is around, lots of other great creators, the guys from My God, a Podcast, and 100 Sanford, and an ever-growing team of recruiting reporters that are young and hungry. So come check us out there. And fall camp's firing up soon, so going to be lots and lots to talk about in the month of August as we head into the season. Shifting this back into the Georgia side of things, we have a question here about Daijun Edwards. Basically, do you think Daijun Edwards will be drafted after this year? And if yes, what range do you think he could go? Do you want to fire away?
Man, I don't hear what I'll say is I have no idea when it comes to running backs. in the NFL these days have no clue what the value is, have no clue what they're looking for. You have running backs in the league now actually going and holding press conferences about what they're being paid. So it's a wild time to be a running back going into the draft. So at the end of the day, I don't know the answer to that. I think Dejon Edwards is a good player. I think he's absolutely a really strong runner. He has good vision. He has good athleticism. I don't know if that's enough in 2024 to be an
Right.
NFL running back draft pick. I just don't. And so I think what you're seeing is the gap is continuing to widen between what the NFL is looking for in a running back and what college teams still value in a running back and how they still utilize running backs. And so I think the way that Georgia utilizes their running backs, even in Todd Monken's system, honestly, I don't know that you're in a place where you have to be an absolutely exceptional running back based on the way that Georgia uses the backs in their system to end up being drafted, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, look at Kenny McIntosh. Kenny McIntosh is a good example, right? Where Kenny McIntosh, if you look at kind of the prototypical, if you say, how does the league want to use running backs? You look at Kenny McIntosh, you're like, it's an athletic guy. He's quick. He's got twitch. He can catch out of the backfield. He can do all of these things, and he ended up being a 7th round pick. And so that's the challenge with the league right now when it comes to running backs.
Yeah, and I think with Edwards, he does run hard and do all those things you're talking about, but I think maybe lacks the high end speed of some other guys that will. I mean, running backs are a dime a dozen, like you were just kind of referencing. I think the other thing that's hard about projecting him is how healthy does Georgia's running back room stay this year? Because there is a world where, like we know Branson had the foot thing in spring practice, and then like Kendall Milton, knock on wood, I hope he stays healthy for an entire 15-game season, but he hasn't to this point in his career.
Yeah.
And so, there is a world maybe where you get to a point in the season where Dejon Edwards is your only like fully healthy back with Andrew Paul working his way back from ACL surgery. So in that scenario, yeah, maybe he's toting the rock 25 times a game and people get eyeballs on him and that helps him. But I think the best thing he can do for himself to get drafted is to catch passes this season. I think that is a skill that you kind of almost have to have in the NFL these days, unless you're just like a Derrick Henry-esque type monster that like is just so incredible at bowling through people that doesn't really matter. So that's my opinion on it. I think we'll see, but my guess is honestly that the answer, if he is drafted like in 2023, we're talking like 5th to 7th round. Like I don't see him being a high round prospect right now. Okay, Dog God with a banger here.
Dog God, it would be better if he spelled God GAWD.
Damn,
just
dude.
there's a little tip.
That
you can
is
have that for free. Dog God.
Then you got a palindrome thing. No, is that
not quite? You got a DW at the end.
That's right.
End, but pretty close. Yeah,
close. A dyslexic palindrome. We should be in lots of blowouts and have lots of backups playing in garbage time. We in this scenario is the University of Georgia football team, in case you're wondering. What backup / third string guys can you see parlaying productive garbage time into increased reps and rotations?
Okay, listen, I don't know who Dog God is, but he obviously hasn't heard that Georgia's going 7-5. And so I think someone needs to make sure that we spread the word that Georgia's going 7-5. We're not going to be in all these blowouts. I mean, we're going to be lucky to be bowl eligible. But if Georgia happens to be in some blowouts, I'm excited to see. I mean, I guess we should probably do maybe both sides of the ball, right? Because instead of trying to conflate, but but I'm excited. I'm excited to see when you go back up third string guys. I'm excited to see some of the wide receivers that Georgia has. Anthony Evans, Zeed Haynes, some of those guys. Really, really excited to see them hopefully get some time to maybe take the top off of it a little bit. Really excited to see some of these, younger linemen. I think it's going to be interesting. The offensive line competition, especially if Georgia gets into some blowouts in those first few games, I think that's going to be really interesting to watch, where you have, especially guys like you have, Austin Blasky and Dylan Fairchild and, some of those guys that are trying to buy for some playing time, potentially for starting roles as you get further into the year. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see on the offense side of the ball, the wide receivers and the offensive line get some productive garbage time.
Yeah, I think that's there's definitely a lot of young talent there, and let's be honest, like it feels like offensive line depth is always the hardest thing to develop in any football program. I mean, look at Alabama the last couple of years; like they've had a hard time developing frontline offensive line depth, much less a two deep. So if Georgia can get those guys snaps, I think it's really key. And you got Monroe Freeling, who was a 5-star offensive tackle in this last cycle. Like at media days, Van Pran shouted out Alu Ba as being a guy that's like come on really hard. And like I was like, that surprises me. Like not that I got it. No offense to Alu, but I just like wasn't the dude that was on the forefront of my mind. So yeah, it's always interesting because I think that there's a lot, especially with these young linemen, like there's such dramatic body transformations that happen this time of year, like during the off season when we don't see these guys on the field for 8 months, that they'll all look very different. For me, in terms of some names that I think like might be able to parlay some time into actual starting snaps, Yazeed Haynes is one of them. You mentioned him earlier, but like the reviews on him continue to be very stellar, and I think like that dude can just move, and anytime you can move, like it's hard to keep you off the field because you can just go run a fly pattern and maybe it's an easy 6.
Yazeed Haynes runs a 4.37 40 or something. Like the guy can absolutely fly.
Yeah, it's
so
I think it is hard. Georgia's first team DBs in bowl practices last year. So
exactly.
And then I think the one that is probably the most obvious for me would be like whoever the second string boundary corner is. Like I guess the third guy in that room. Like we know Lassiter is going to be the number 1 corner there. But there's 3 guys competing for the starting spot across from him with Nyland Green and Everett and Humphrey,
Julian
and
Humphrey,
AJ Harris. Like there's all these guys. So I want to see what they look like because, I mean, they were like all 5-star guys that were close to it, and you just never know. Like I think Georgia's had tremendous injury luck the last 2 years for the most part. Maybe not tremendous, but it's been pretty good. And we'll see what happens if they don't, Do you have any other names that you're excited to see on offense or defense?
I mean, I'm excited to see how much time guys like Jordan Hall and Damon Wilson, some of those guys. I mean, at the end of the day, Georgia has just hauled in some amazing recruiting classes over the last 2 or 3 years, and so you've got a lot of people in that backup and third spot that if you get some blowout time, I'm just always excited to see some of those guys. The linebackers are one that we didn't talk about, but like would love to see CJ Allen get some productive garbage time. Xavier Sorey, see how he's progressing, where he is. Like EJ Lightsey is another one. I mean, we can just keep naming names. It's just at the end of the day, there's a lot of guys that I'm really excited to see.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you bring up linebackers because our friend June Recruiting Fearmonger has a question about them. He asks about Smile Mondon. He says, if Mondon can't go the first 4 to 5 games of the year, how do you see the inside linebacker room panning out? And then do you put Jalen Walker ahead of Lightsey and the freshman? Does this impact how much work he gets at offensive linebacker? Is Sorey a lock to start? June Recruiting Fearmonger has major concerns here.
Concerns.
So, yeah, I think I would be shocked. Not shocked. I would be a little bit surprised if Mondon was just totally on the shelf for 5 games. But, I don't know. We'll see. Foot injuries are really tricky, honestly. So maybe I shouldn't be that surprised because they're just fickle. But I think that Georgia came out of fall camp with I thought Xavier Sorey was maybe the guy like next to Dumas Johnson. Certainly looked that way on G-Day, and that like the CJ Allen buzz is extremely real, as is the Raylan Wilson buzz. But yeah,
it's the quarterback of the defense, right? Like there's so much that you have to know to play that position, no matter how good you are and athletic you are. It's like the quarterback of the defense. There's just so much that you have to awareness that you have to build in, and perception, understanding offensive formations and all those things. I don't expect CJ Allen or Raylan Wilson to be the next guy up if Mondon can't go, for sure.
I think Lightsey is the one to look at. There's a couple people at times during spring practice that were like, I think that the dude might be the number 3 linebacker on the team. So, which is incredible. Like just kind of from where he was a couple years ago. And I think I'm interested to see what we hear about him in fall camp, but it is. I have a very much the same question about Jalen Walker because he does like have the talent to come off the edge and be like kind of more like a Dallas Turner type player, but he's also like 6'2" instead of 6'4", so he's not going to be a traditional like NFL style pass rusher or whatever. And he was out for spring with the labrum injury, and all we know is that he was working in the meeting rooms with both positions. So we'll see where he's getting his reps this fall. Okay. In your personal preference, who are the 2 guys you want the most in the class of 2024 that are currently uncommitted?
Woo. Are these? Maybe we should talk about. Are we talking about realistic targets? Are we talking about?
Are we talking about guys? That.
Yeah, I mean, it's like can we talk about guys that it's like, hey, if we could just wave a magic wand, we probably should talk about
whatever you want.
Yeah, I think we should talk about realistic targets. I'll let you go first. Who's on your list?
So yeah, from a realistic standpoint, I think number 1 would be Williams Nwaneri. And I'm using this time to fold this question in. Latest on Williams Nwaneri's recruitment was one of the questions that we were asked. I think this is down to Georgia and Mizzou. And I put an update on the board about it today. I'll leave it at that. Go check us out on dogcentral.com But I would put him on your list of your two guys that you want the most that are uncommitted. And then I would, oh man, it's like I don't think Georgia's getting Jeremiah Smith, right? Like I think that he's continued to, kind of slide away into other places. And so I think Georgia does still need a wide receiver elsewhere in this class. So either Wingo or McClellan, the two Missouri kids. That would be my answer. And I don't really have a strong opinion on one over the other. I think they're both pretty good players. And then I guess for the one that's committed elsewhere, I'll say Jeremiah Smith just because, like, I think that dude is one of the best receiver prospects we've seen in a decade plus.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say if I that was going to be my answer. If we could just wave a magic wand and say, hey, guys that are recruited elsewhere that Georgia may not actually be in play with anymore, Jeremiah Smith would be on that list. I like Williams Noir. I can't say his last name, but I like him. I think for me too, I think Georgia has a really good chance of getting him, but I really like Nate Frazier's game, running back out of Mater Dei. I think, I think at the end of the day, Georgia has gotten about everyone that they wanted at the positions in this class. The biggest gap right now for me, it would be wide receiver. So Jeremiah Smith, if we can't get Jeremiah Smith, Wingo be absolutely fantastic. The challenge, I think people, like Williams Noari, and some of those Missouri kids, Missouri has a state law, where if you're in high school, you can start earning on NIL endorsement deals as long as you are committed to a public university in the state of Missouri. So these Missouri kids, if they commit to Missouri, then they can go ahead and start earning on NIL endorsement deals while they're still in high school through their last year of high school. So people wonder a little bit, like, why is Missouri in play for some of these kids? And some of it is, they're Missouri kids, but a lot of it is those NIL laws are very conducive to getting those guys to commit to in-state schools and going ahead and signing endorsement deals and earning on those endorsement deals while they're still in high school.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, if you're still, it's an interesting law, and I think that's like why the Missouri type law is why you hear some coaches and administrators asking for regulation from Congress. I personally think, like, if your plan is to let Congress come up with the plan, then you don't have a plan, and you're getting paid too much for nothing. But
listen, Brett McMurphy tweeted this week about Tommy Tuberville weighed in on NIL law. Who would be, he's in the legislature in Washington D.C. and would be someone that would likely be involved with any NIL like regulation. Tommy Tuberville left Texas Tech in the middle of a recruiting visit to go to Cincinnati. Like, this is a guy we're talking about, giving a governmental body oversight over rules around NIL and earnings and all those things. And one of the guys that would likely be involved actually bailed on his current school in the middle of a recruiting visit to go to another school. So it's just wild.
Yeah. For sure. I know, right? It's like, wow. Okay. So, it's now that you can't do it yourself, so we're gonna now have you do it for everyone else. That seems like a good idea. Yeah. Our friend Harry, he points out that as we sensed and predicted on this show, Riddick has flipped to Auburn. Who gets his spot? So that's a really fascinating question. I think that's one of the better mysteries left in the 2024 cycle for Georgia. And you've got Chris Jones. He's
Mm-hmm.
one Virginia kid, linebacker, who is built like a kind of old school between the tackles linebacker. And then you got Chris Cole, who is 6'3". I saw the dude at Elite 11. He is a legit 6'3", maybe like 6'3 and a half. And big arms, and he was playing defensive back not that long ago, but he's like blown up over the offseason to 225, and athletically, he looks like he's a freak. Do you take one of them? Do you take both of them? I think Georgia's going to take another inside linebacker, and it seems like Chris Jones, might be that guy very near future. But what do you think about the whole Chris Cole conundrum?
Man, Chris Cole is so interesting, right? So when Riddick flipped, you all of a sudden had a lot of these recruiting experts, recruiting guys, all of a sudden putting in crystal balls and predictions for Chris Cole to go to Georgia. I don't think Chris Cole has made up his mind. I think Georgia has a much more likely chance to have Chris Jones commit to Georgia in the very near future, which may then you see, does that push Chris Cole somewhere else?
Right.
Because I think that's what's going to happen. I think Chris Jones is going to commit to Georgia, and then I think Chris Cole will end up going somewhere else. But you never know, man. I mean, I did not think that Glenn Schumann was going to pull Raylan Wilson, CJ Allen, and Troy Bowles on the same class, So I think, Georgia can certainly take 3 if they want to take 3. But if you ask me today, I think Chris Jones is going to get his spot. And I think, Chris Jones is you mentioned it, built like an old school linebacker, very athletic guy, but I think he brings a little bit to that room that is, it's missing a little bit in terms of the type of depth that you want sometimes for, some of those particular situational linebacker packages and things like that. So if you look 2 years from now, if you need, somebody in some of these situations, he would be a guy that could certainly play that role.
Absolutely. Okay. Last one of the night here. So this is kind of a fun question. This is from Cam. Although I find it extremely unlikely, if UGA somehow wins this year and next year and 4-peats, would you consider Kirby the GOAT? If not, how much more would he have to do to get that title? Is Kirby the GOAT?
I'm going to say this, okay? I'm just going to say this.
Okay, here we go.
If Kirby Smart, if Georgia 4-peats, okay? If Georgia wins 4 national college football championships in a row, with a college football playoff that's 4 teams, and then meaning that you would have won
the first 12 team.
The first 12 team college football playoff. If I'm Kirby Smart, I am taking my giant mountain of money and I'm saying I'm done. I'm 50 years old. Peace out. I'm going to spend time with my kids. I'm going out as a 4-peat champion. I mean, people, a legitimate 3-peat has not happened in college football since the 1930s. So if you're able to do that, you're already in,
Well, and that one wasn't even legitimate, apparently.
It wasn't. No, it was Minnesota.
It was before the AP poll even existed. So.
Yeah. So literally, if you think about like the traditional way of recognizing national champions, no one has ever 3-peated. And so if you just do that, then I think you're in that category. Again, GOAT is always it's always a controversial thing, right? Because at the end of the day, there are so many factors, both the style of football is being played, the resources you have available to you, the way that you have the capability to build your staff versus other schools that don't have the capability. So GOAT, I think is very subjective. But if you win 4 national championships in a row, I consider you the GOAT, but I also I would hang it up, man. I would just be like, you know what? This is
good.
a great
I'm tired
ride.
of this.
Yeah. Well, I just
Tired
think
of this.
like what could be, do you go for 5, right? Like I think at some point if you win 4 in a row, it's like, wait a second. But I know Kirby Smart. I do think Kirby Smart is going to coach 10 more years, and then my thing is I think he's going to put 10 more years in and then hang it up. So I think he's going to be a young,
Which is, yeah, he'd
mhm.
be late 50s, 57.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's plenty of
yep,
time to enjoy the family and
yep.
the grandbabies and all that good stuff. I think it's,
Hmm.
like he's already achieved more than 99% of the guys that coach in the sport. Maybe even more than that. But yeah, I think if you win 4 in a row, like it feels so wild to me that I can't really wrap my head around how I would
Hmm.
think about it, honestly.
Hmm.
But I think you'd have the claim of like, yeah, this guy's the best to ever do it because the
Yeah,
organizational consistency and the ability to keep your guys dialed
yeah,
year after year.
yeah.
Uh, what would be hilarious is to figure out who there would be guys on that 4th team that were on the 2021 team too, like those
Could
guys
you
that have 4 title rings in 4 years.
could you imagine
No,
you come to
I
Georgia
couldn't.
as a recruit? No, you can't. But you come to Georgia as a recruit and you leave with 4 national championship rings. Like
Yeah, it's
I don't
crazy.
I don't know. But yeah, man, I just don't I'll say this. We saw it with Ohio State. I was at the game. I know you were at the game. We saw it up close and personal with how fragile this sport is and
Yeah.
how literally things can, hinge on inches, on plays, on one kick going wide left, on a timeout, called at the right time. And so what it takes to win, if you can do that 4 in a row, I think you have to be the GOAT. Like for what it takes to actually climb that mountain and win 1, much less 2 in a row. But yeah, that's also why I think it's going to be a lot harder for Georgia to win 3 in a row than a lot of people are giving it credit for.
I
I
agree.
think it's going to be hard, man. I just don't. I think Georgia fans should buckle up for a really good ride in the regular season, and then hopefully you've played enough competition and you're healthy enough and you have enough depth to do it again. But I think a three-peat is going to be very, very tough.
Yeah, I think that the season for Georgia. I got asked last night. I was a guest on another podcast, and
Mhm.
it was like, well, what's the biggest thing that would keep Georgia from three-peating? And it's like, dude, there's not any one like football reason really. It's like I could come up with like, how does Mike Bobo transition, or
Mhm.
like I don't know what Carson Beck looks like in pressure moments when the things aren't going well. Like,
Mhm.
and that's all true, but at the end of the day, it's what you just said. Like, it's just that this sport is random as hell, and the kids are super young, but they're also phenomenal athletes, and so it lends itself to crazy swings, and like
Yeah.
it lends itself to plays like the kick six and the prayer at Jordan Hare happening in consecutive ball games. Like that happened, and
Yeah.
the last time there was a team that had a chance to go for 3 straight, it was Alabama in 2013, and their bid to do that ended
On a kick
on
six.
a freaking field goal that was returned for a touchdown. So
Yeah.
that's yeah. I mean, if Georgia
Yeah.
does this, honestly, I think like you have to discuss, the longevity is not there of Saban, but I think you have to really ask yourself like, is this the greatest run that we've seen? Is like, because it's just as good as Saban is and was, there was never the organizational continuity to try and do 3 in a row. I mean, they tried to do it, but like to do it. So I think
Yeah.
even if Georgia does 3 in a row, like that would be, people are talking about like, oh, that's just
Mhm.
that's just something that's going to happen almost. But like, I think if we actually get into the season and Georgia's heading to the college football playoff and folks really sit down and try and wrap their head around what it actually means, that you'll understand, like, going, you'd probably be talking about Georgia going either 44-1 or 43-2 over a 45 game stretch, which is just.
Yeah. And I mean, Clemson had, again, easy schedule, like Georgia. We can admit it. Georgia's going to have a relatively easy schedule this year. Clemson had one of those, and they couldn't go.
Pitted.
Yeah, exactly. And so those situations, twice. But even that run, like what Georgia has done, where you're 29-1 over the last 2 seasons, 133 over the last 34. Like Clemson did that and still couldn't win back to back, much less 3 in a row. So I mean, it's just hard. It's so hard. So
cool. All right. Oh, this is actually a fun question real quick from Greg Rosenberg. If Bo Jackson played college football today, what position would he play? Tight end, edge, inside linebacker? Anything but running back, I think. I'm thinking of Nicholas Harbor as the closest thing to Bo today. All right, so this is a really good question, Greg. Harbor is nothing like Bo Jackson, just in the sense that nobody is. I mean, Bo Jackson was a whole other freak of nature, but the positional variability you're talking about is pretty fascinating. Edge rushers get paid, man, but I don't think Bo is quite tall enough to be an edge rusher.
Bo, Bo's 6'1". He was 6'1", 225 pounds.
Yeah, he's not playing edge.
So he's built like a running back,
or an inside
linebacker. Yeah, inside linebacker. Yeah. I think either one of those. But I think Bo, man, I think if you take Bo from his college days and placed him now, I think the dude could tote the rock. I think he absolutely would be a running back. And I think if you had to give him another position, then maybe inside linebacker. Definitely not tall enough to play tight end these days. Definitely not tall enough to play edge these days.
Right.
But I would love to see Bo Jackson prime Bo Jackson lineup as an inside linebacker in one of Kirby Smart's defenses. Would be wild.
That would be wild. That would be crazy. So before we go, we just want to tell you real quick about our friends at Home Field Apparel. I'm wearing a Home Field Apparel shirt right now. It is very soft, cozy, comfortable. John was rocking one on Twitter for Sunday at the British Open.
Absolutely.
They make great stuff, and they're very committed to us at Dog Central and also to Georgia. They make stuff for every school, but Joshua Johns, their head of partnerships and social media, is a UGA alum, and they're planning some cool events and such in Athens this fall that we will be a part of. So support us, support them. Go check out homefieldapparel.com. You can use that code on the bottom of the screen there, Dog Central 23, all caps, and get yourself 20% off on your first order. So, John, any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
Nope. Home Field, comfiest t-shirts I have in my drawers these days. So go do it. Really excited. I mean, we're getting close to football, guys.
We are.
It is almost that time. So really, really pumped. One thing I will say for the folks who are still listening, when you're talking about the greatest of all time, where does it fall when you take the one seat that you have in your Mercedes-Benz at your spring game and give it to a recruit that is committed to one of your rivals and then flips to your other biggest rival? Nick Saban had Riddick in his Benz on A-Day. And ended up not landing him. So I don't know what that says. I don't know. So that would be my parting thought is if you're talking about, the status of a program, if you've used your passenger seat for one single recruit, And then he ended up going to flipping from one of your rivals and going to one of your other rivals. Not a great look.
Not my goat. Hashtag not my goat.
Not my goat. I love it.